This is the story of a building that outlived its own empire by 70 years. On the east side of Detroit, along East Grand Boulevard, once stood 3.5 million square feet of reinforced concrete, the largest abandoned factory in America. It built the finest luxury cars this country ever produced. It built the engines that helped win the Second World War. And then it spent 6 decades rotting in full public view, becoming the single most photographed ruin of American industry. To understand how an empire dies, you don't need the balance sheets. You just need to walk through this building. Every chapter of the Packard Motor Car Company's rise and fall is written into its concrete. Start at the beginning in Warren, Ohio, in November of 1899, when James Ward Packard completed his first automobile. The story goes that Packard bought a Winton, found it unreliable, complained to Alexander Winton himself, and was told that if he was so smart, he should build his own car. So he did, and it was better. Within 3 years, a group of Detroit investors led by Henry Bourne Joy saw what Packard was building and convinced him to move the company to Detroit, a city that was about to become the center of the industrial world. In 1903, the company hired a young architect named Albert Kahn to design its new factory on 40 acres along East Grand Boulevard. The first buildings were nothing special, just conventional brick and heavy timber, the way factories had been built for a century. They were dark, cramped, and above all, flammable. Factory fires were the nightmare of every industrialist of the era, because wooden floors soaked in machine oil, open flames, and sparks from machinery meant entire plants could burn to the ground in hours. Then came building number 10. Around 1905, Kahn was working with his engineer brother Julius Kahn, who had developed a new system for reinforcing concrete with steel bars, a method that would come to be known as the Kahn system. And together they did something radical. They built a factory out of reinforced concrete. It was one of the very first reinforced concrete automobile factories anywhere in the world, and it changed industrial architecture forever. Concrete didn't burn. Concrete could carry enormous loads on slender columns, which meant wide open floors and huge windows flooding the workspace with daylight. Concrete was fast to build and nearly indestructible. Henry Ford saw it and hired Albert Kahn to design Highland Park, where the moving assembly line was born. Kahn became the architect of American industry, and he would eventually design more than 1,000 factories, and it all started here on East Grand Boulevard. Hold on to that fact, because it's the dark irony at the heart of this story. Kahn built the Packard plant to be indestructible, and it was. That's exactly why it stood there, rotting for 60 years after everyone left. The building's greatest strength became the city's longest curse. But before the rot, there was glory. Before we get to the glory years, if stories like this one about the empires America built and then walked away from are your kind of thing, subscribe, because this channel is full of them. Through the teens, 20s, and 30s, Packard wasn't just a luxury brand. It was the American luxury brand, ahead of Cadillac, ahead of Lincoln. In that era, American luxury meant the 3 Ps, Packard, Pierce Arrow, and Peerless, and Packard was first among equals. The company's advertising slogan was so confident it barely advertised at all. Ask the man who owns one. That was it. No specifications, no boasting, because the product spoke for itself. Packards were owned by presidents, movie stars, and royalty across the globe. The 12-cylinder Packards of the 1930s are still considered some of the finest automobiles ever built in America. At its height, the plant complex grew to dozens of buildings across the site, employing tens of thousands of workers, and over its lifetime, it would produce more than 1.6 million cars. And then the plant had its finest hour, and it had nothing to do with luxury. When the Second World War came, Packard's precision engineering was exactly what the country needed. The company took Rolls-Royce's legendary Merlin aircraft engine, the engine of the Spitfire and the Lancaster bomber, and mastered building it under license at massive scale. The Packard-built Merlin, the V1650, went into the P-51 Mustang, the fighter that turned the air war over Europe. Packard also built marine engines that powered American PT boats across the Pacific. The same floors that had assembled limousines for millionaires were now turning out tens of thousands of aero engines. This was the plant's peak, with around 40,000 workers running around the clock, building the machinery of victory, which makes what happened next so much harder to watch. Packard came out of the war with money in the bank, a gold-plated reputation, and a fatal strategic confusion it had been nursing since the Depression. Here is the choice that killed the company. In the 1930s, to survive the Depression, Packard did something Cadillac refused to do. It went down market. The mid-priced 120 and later the Clipper line sold in volume and kept the company alive. But volume came at a price that didn't show up on the balance sheet for years, and that price was the brand. When a doctor's neighbor could buy a Packard, the doctor started looking at a Cadillac. General Motors kept Cadillac exclusive and let its cheaper divisions chase volume. Packard put its sacred name on affordable cars, and slowly, the magic drained out of it. Pierce Arrow and Peerless had already collapsed under similar pressure. After the war, Packard was neither fish nor fowl. It was too small to fight General Motors on volume, and no longer prestigious enough to own the luxury market it had invented. The end came with brutal speed. In 1954, Packard merged with Studebaker, a company whose finances turned out to be far sicker than Packard's leadership understood. The merger that was supposed to save both companies became an anchor. In 1956, Packard ceased production at the East Grand Boulevard plant, idling roughly 11,000 workers. The last true Detroit-built Packards rolled out that year. For 1957 and 58, the name was stapled onto rebadged Studebakers built in Indiana, cars the enthusiasts mockingly called Packard Bakers. In 1958, the name was quietly dropped altogether. America's greatest luxury mark didn't go out with a crash, it went out with an asterisk. But here's where this story splits from every other dead car company. Studebaker's plants found other lives. Packard's headquarters became something else entirely. It became a monument because Kahn's concrete wouldn't fall down. For the first few decades, the plant limped along. Smaller companies leased sections for manufacturing and warehousing, everything from chemical processing to storage to small industry. Parts of the complex were still in commercial use into the late 1990s. Then the city of Detroit, believing it owned the property, evicted the remaining tenants in 1999 to prepare for demolition and promptly lost a legal battle over who actually held the title. Think about that. The building's decline into total abandonment began with an eviction for a demolition that never happened, ordered by an owner that turned out not to be the owner. With no tenants and the ownership tangled in court, the plant was simply left open to the city, and the city was left open to the plant. What followed was one of the strangest afterlives any industrial building has ever had. In the 1990s, its empty halls hosted underground raves, and some of the mythology of Detroit techno was written inside Packard's concrete shells. The pioneers of that sound, Juan Atkins, Derek May, and Kevin Saunderson, the Belleville Three, helped build a music movement in a city of ruins, and the Packard plant was part of that landscape. Later, the Movement Electronic Music Festival would celebrate that legacy just miles away, while the plant itself continued to decay. Scrappers stripped out every pound of copper, steel, and aluminum, gutting the building from the inside. Arson fires burned through it year after year until firefighters responded only to protect the surrounding neighborhood. Trees grew on the rooftops. In 2010, a Banksy mural appeared on one of its walls, was cut out by a gallery, and sparked a legal fight over who owns art painted on an abandoned ruin. Hollywood came too, and the plant appeared in films and television shows hungry for authentic apocalypse. Above all came the photographers and urban explorers from all over the world, turning the Packard plant into the global icon of ruin porn. That particular aesthetic of industrial decay that academics and photographers have spent decades debating. The plant became the shorthand image for Detroit's collapse, which was deeply unfair to Detroit, and yet the city couldn't do anything about it because for years it didn't even legally control the site. Then came the strangest chapter of all. In 2013, a Peruvian developer named Fernando Palazuelo bought most of the site at a Wayne County tax auction for $405,000, roughly the price of a suburban house for what was once the most advanced factory on Earth. He announced a $350 million 15-year master plan with offices, shops, restaurants, apartments, and art spaces. There was a groundbreaking ceremony, there were renderings, there were public tours, and then year after year, there was nothing. By 2020, the vision was officially abandoned, and in 2021, the city of Detroit sued to have the plant declared a public nuisance and torn down. A judge agreed in 2022. The Packard plant was, in the eyes of the law, no longer a building. It was a hazard. The demolition itself became a saga. It began in October of 2022 with a building that was literally leaning against an occupied neighbor. It stopped and started through 2023 amid ownership disputes. Then in March of 2024, the city launched the final phase, backed by federal recovery money, with the mayor calling the plant a source of national embarrassment. That October, the iconic Southern Water Tower, the last landmark on the skyline, was pulled down with 2 guy wires. By December of 2024, the demolition was complete, 3.5 million square feet reduced to 40 acres of graded dirt. It took Albert Kahn about a decade to build the complex. It took the wreckers more than 2 years to bring it down, and that, in its own way, was Kahn's final vindication. The concrete really was that strong. So here's what stands today in 2026. Exactly 2 buildings, 2 survivors out of dozens, facing each other across East Grand Boulevard, including the old administration building, the face of Packard, deliberately spared to preserve some physical memory of what happened here. And even now, the site can't find peace. In December of 2025, Detroit announced Packard Park, a $50 million plan for a new manufacturing facility, affordable housing, an indoor skate park, even a museum of Detroit electronic music, a nod to those illegal raves that once echoed through the ruins. 3 months later, the deal collapsed. A new mayor took office, a deadline passed, and in March of 2026, the city walked away to explore other options. As of today, the future of the Packard site is once again a blank page. 70 years after the last Packard rolled out, the land still doesn't know what it wants to be. And maybe that's the real ending here. The Packard Motor Car Company made one bad strategic bet, trading the prestige it had spent decades building for the volume it needed to survive a crisis, and the market executed the sentence within a generation. Companies die fast, but buildings don't. Kahn's concrete held the company's memory hostage for 60 years, forcing Detroit to drive past its greatest failure every single day. Too expensive to fix, too strong to fall. The empire died in 1958. The evidence stood until 2024. And on East Grand Boulevard, 2 concrete survivors are still waiting to find out whether they're monuments or just the last things left to demolish. Ask the man who owns one. For half a century, that was a boast. For the 60 years after, the answer to that question was a courtroom argument. Today, the owner is the city of Detroit, and even it isn't sure what it owns. 40 empty acres, 2 stubborn buildings, and the longest industrial funeral in American history.